keep my heart set upon your voice, knowing that your word, it never comes back void. No weapon will prosper, no enemy triumph. He will not overcome. He can't scale these walls. Injustice will not win. Hell's gates will not prevail. Not on my time. Not on my watch. I am a watchman, and I take my place. As I wait, I will keep the faith. 'Cause I am a watchman, and I stand my ground. But if I never see it, I will stay the course. I will run the race, I will fight the fight, and I will keep the faith. I keep my eyes fixed on you.
Well, good day, everybody. Pastor Tim Carscadden here, Christian Center Shreveport. But the pipeline report, as we come to you today here on Monday, the fifth day of May 2025. Cinco de Mayo is the Spanish holiday here. We're not here to talk about that. Just letting you know that's what day it is. And we are so glad you've joined us and are part of our pipeline report. It's on Rumble, YouTube channel, our pipeline report on both of those channels. You can catch us. As you know, you're watching us there. But if you like to, you can share that with your friends. Again, thanks for your comments and telling us where you're from. Our faithful ones always pop on first. We so appreciate all you guys, Greg and Danielle and Debbie. We thank you, especially. You guys are so amazing, ladies and gentlemen, I should say, that pop on here every day, every Monday, I should say, and listen to our message and what God's bringing through us for the time that we live in. I think that's the most important thing we try to do, is be relative to what God is saying right now prophetically, and to vet the news and say these are things that we need to be praying for and praying about, because we feel like it's on the heart of the Father. There's so much going on right now. It's a very hot moment in the spirit, to say the least. We're in that period between Passover and Pentecost. Also, that word that Chuck Pierce gave, I think all the way through May 20, he felt like during that period, that 40 days, like when Jesus was having visitations on the earth, that we'd be in that time. We've been sharing that as well. I did a whole message on the road to Emmaus, not this past Sunday, but the Sunday before, speaking of these visitations that we're believing God for. And we've been having them, been having some dreams, been having some encounters with the Lord, and we'll share some of those today, and then get you to pray on these issues. I did spend my time on the podcast today talking about several of these dreams, and we'll get into those as well. I think it's a very important moment. I got my son Zach's with me as well. He'll pop in here in just a minute and share his insight, what the Lord's speaking to him about the hour we're in. Okay, so let's frame this. We're titling it Skating on Thin Ice. It's part of my dream I had Saturday night, early Sunday morning, and it pertains to Israel and the world and what's going on. That's a phrase, skating on thin ice. That's when you tell somebody who's walking a fine line, they're about to be getting trouble, that hey, buddy or lady, whatever, you're skating on thin ice, which meant you could fall right through, and you're lucky to be even standing right now. That's kind of how the term comes, a natural term. But in my dream, we were actually skating on thin ice concerning world chaos, especially with Israel. And it looks like, and I also saw some black ice, which, if you know what that is, because the pavement is black, there's a thin layer of ice that you don't see. And if you're driving, many of you know we don't see this very often in the South, but in the North, you know what I'm talking about. When you see that, you don't. I mean, when you don't see that, when you tires go over it, you lose control, you lose traction, and next thing you're out of control. And I saw that, so I felt like the Lord was saying, we're in a moment where things are spinning out of control, especially concerning Israel, but also the world, because the dream was multi-layered, and we'll get into that in a minute. I'll share the dream and then how I think it applies to where we are today. But for you, we're going to give you prayer initiatives today, how to pray and how to partner with the Lord in this hour. So we just want to fully embrace that. So let's talk about Israel first, and we'll start there. Where do I start? The chaos that's going on. Now, first of all, President Trump will be traveling to the Middle East. I think it's next week. Witkoff is a negotiator, is already there speaking. Just spoke to Putin in Russia, but he's also going to be speaking to the Egyptians, Qataris, the Palestinians who will listen, and Israelis about potential peace deal, ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. Now, meanwhile, Israel has called up 15,000 soldiers, and they are beginning to share or speak about a Gaza invasion to begin to go in. And basically, there are some topics about even taking over the whole Gaza Strip. And I think only 40% of the tunnels have been destroyed. So that means 60% of them are still intact. We do know that most of the hostages are living in there. President Trump stated last week that their intelligence says there's 50 something hostages, but only 24 are alive. The rest are dead, and the families are asking for their remains. But only 24 are alive, and we do know they hide them in the tunnels. So this is a very delicate moment for Israel if you're going to go in there, because you could bomb and actually kill the hostages. But I trust their intelligence, and let's pray for that. Let's pray that they have wise intelligence, that they'll know where they are. Most of the time they do. Palestinians are more than happy to share. Matter of fact, I saw the Israelis dropped money with a little chip in it for a phone. This is pretty incredible. It's a chip you put in a phone, and so they can't be tracked, but you do, and you can call the Israeli government on this chip. You plug it into your phone. You can call them and tell them where Hamas is, and you can also tell them where the hostages are. So they dropped money and gave them those chips. So that's happening as well. Look, Israel's smart. Uh, when want money, they'll do just about anything. You do hear about the people in Gaza Strip are starving. There are some problems that they do have with food and supplies, but that's not a really problem. You understand, the Hamas and the Palestinians have to have a narrative that Israel is not supplying them their supplies and the food and water and everything. So they do allow a portion of those in the strip to starve, and or at least to be lacking resources. While I saw videos of the shops in Gaza City and other places where, just like walking down New York City right now, everything's wide open, food everywhere, plenty of supplies, normal life. So you understand, they deprive them so they can have camera shots that the world can see them starving, because without that they lose their edge with the government, the world opinion. So it's part of their propaganda in order to make that happen. So from what we've been told, Netanyahu and others, even on the ground there, that there's more than enough supplies. They're just withholding them at certain places so they can do their videos and so forth. Okay, so we know that that's going on as well. So in the midst of that, you also have the bombing that just happened at Ben Gurion Airport, which is the name of the airport in Tel Aviv. It's the main international airport of Israel. And I'll share my dream. Zach, you want to say anything about the Gaza or anything before we move into the dream? I want to make sure. Okay. Uh, here's what I want to cover. In the dream, it was Saturday night. Again, I shared some of this on my podcast. But in the dream, I was at international airport. I believed it was Tel Aviv, Israel. But I also, it's weird in dreams sometimes they're multi-layered. I felt it was there, but I also felt it could be anywhere. Okay, if that makes sense to you at some level. Okay, just put that in your bracket there and keep it there. Well, in the dream, there was all these chaotic things going on around the airport and all over, and rescues were going on. There was these rescue helicopters, which I thought were really unusual. They were blue, a brilliant blue color, which to me speaks of revelation and so forth. Anyway, they were just being sent out, and I was part of a team that was rescuing people and rescuing from situations. And I'd be in this little tarmac, I mean, in this terminal area, and then one of the workers would come out of the tarmac and say, "Hey, here we need to go and help." And we'd go out and we'd go fly out and do whatever we can. I remember the skies being very volatile, storms. It was a season of storms, and I really believe that's where we are right now. We're in a major storm right now, prophetically in the world, and it's going on. And so we'd go do our rescue work, and then we would come back, and I'd be exhausted. Everybody would be exhausted. And then all of a sudden, the guy'd come out of the tarmac and knock on the door of the terminal again, say, "Hey, we got more." I said, "Not again," and so we'd have to go back out again. And so there was a point where I got on the tarmac, and it was ice, like it'd been like freezing weather or whatever. It was ice, and it was thin ice, and everybody was given ice skates to navigate because the ice had covered the tarmac, and there was thin ice. And I heard that statement, "You're skating on thin ice," which meant this thing is very dangerous, very volatile. Thin ice, you can fall through and freeze to death. Then all of a sudden I saw black ice, and I heard that term. There's black ice here as well. And I looked down, and fortunately the skates would allow us to navigate and to move forward and get back to the terminal and move around and help as much as we could help in that situation. So to me, the dream's multi-layered. I go in there, and I have this computer that y'all can't see it, but I have it. This is the main computer I use for this pipeline report. And so to me, it was there in a dream as with my sticker. Let me show you this. There you go. I have pipeline report there. And it was that computer. And then it also was my Bible, the word. So I think it was this whole thing. We're reporting on the word and what God is saying prophetically in his word, because he is the word. So when he speaks prophetically, it's his word. If it's from him, it's his word. In other words, the word is speaking it. And he's saying, look, it's a very volatile time. It's this time of storms, and we're on thin ice right now, and there's more coming. Because in my dream, we did some, and then I thought, oh no, here we go again. So there's another layer. So I wake up from the dream, and my phone, I got my updates in the middle of the night from Israel, and there was a bombing at the Tel Aviv airport, Ben Gurion airport. A missile from Yemen had made it through. They weren't able to intercept it. I think it was like 500 meters away from the airport. Fortunately, it hit an open field, an area where nobody was. You can see some of the videos I watched that you can actually look on the tarmac and see it. And it was very similar to what I saw in my dream. So I knew it was a now word, and that's where we are right now. But I knew there's more coming. And now, after they investigated the missile, it was from Iran. In other words, it was made in Iran. It came from Yemen, but it was made in Iran. And that was it. They had a special security meeting with Netanyahu and his special security group. And now they're talking about retaliation. Now, for us as Americans, this is where it gets kind of convoluted, because the Americans do not want Israel involved in Yemen, because they're bombing them right now. And they're basically, I know what our government's probably going to say. Don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. But these missiles keep coming. The Houthis are having no problems getting missiles out of Yemen and coming up the Red Sea and coming toward Israel. Even some of them coming around the Mediterranean and coming in, like that one did in Tel Aviv. So uh, Israel's not going to trust America to take care of them. They're going to take care of themselves. Right now, I heard there was a evacuation of the airport in Yemen, the international airport, because they have an expectancy that Israel's going to bomb the airport. Don't know if that's going to happen or not, but Iran is the target. So this ratchets up the battle with Iran because it's an Iranian missile. Yeah, it came from the Houthis, but everybody knows that it was given to them by Iran. So now we have this Prince of Persia battle where we're seeing the spirit realm issue going on. You got Gaza, they're going in there. We have the Russia Ukraine war. You now also have um, India and Pakistan. Now, most people are not talking about that. They're not talking about India and Pakistan. Now, you got to understand something that Pakistan is a um, nuclear nation, and they have nuclear weapons, and they are Islamic. They have an Islamic government. And so Iran and them are partnering. And then this popped up today on the Jerusalem Post. As we see here, Iran looks to Pakistan with nuclear weapon ambitions, and Alice a visit on the heels of the recent terrorist attacks with India's Kashmir region, which now India and Pakistan are at war with each other, a small war, and so forth. There's tensions. And so now Iran shows up to Pakistan. We're going to be your friends. We'll help you, because India is a much stronger force, much larger army. It's, other than China, it's the largest population in the world, and they have lots of support. They're withholding the water from Pakistan, which they water all their crops with. 80% of all their crops are irrigated from these waters, and India is locking up the dams, as well as there's firing across the border. This all started when some Pakistanis killed some Hindus in the Kashmir region. So here we picture here the Iranian minister going to Pakistan, who can supply them with a nuclear weapon, as far as the way to send it out. So this is a real serious issue, because now you're getting this thing's getting much more broad than we want in this situation. So I kind of give that as an update as what's going on there. So you have all this volatility, and it reminds us of what Cindy Jacobs had said through her group, her prophetic group. 5 people had visions, or prophets had visions that in 2025 the enemy would try to start the third world war. So we're in the midst of it. It's the throes of it. So we must pray. It is not, I don't believe it is. And we're going to make that declaration from here that it's not time for for world war. And in my dream, I saw that Matthew 24:6, which says that there'll be wars and rumors of wars, but do not be frightened, for these things must happen. But this will happen before the end. But then you follow that passage, it leads into awakening and revival. So these are the things. And I think now with the negotiations, Zach, I'd kind of probably like you to speak to this about Witkoff and what he's trying to do. I have mixed emotions about Witkoff. I think he's Jewish, but I know he's trying to do well. Supposedly, he's put an ultimatum to the Hamas that by the time President Trump gets to the Middle East next week, we need to have a deal, or else. Kind of that's what he's basically saying. So he's talking to the Qataris, which cannot be trusted. He's talking to the Egyptians, which cannot be trusted, and he's talking to Hamas, or at least some of their representatives at some level, and he's talking to the Israelis. So your thoughts, Zach, on that insight as far as what Witkoff's doing in the whole Gaza battle? You're muted there. See if we can get his volume here. Still can't hear him.
Checking. Here we go. The issue with Witkoff is he said, Hamas and everybody needs to come to a deal before Trump gets there. But he's also, before there was a 2-month waiting period that they were going to try to make this deal happen, has said, well, we can kind of push this off long run. So the Qataris and Hamas know that Witkoff is nothing but a straw man, kind of holding in place. Now, Trump coming there will probably force his hand. That way, this will kind of be the focus. But involved in this Pakistani deal, we can't forget that China holds a port in Pakistan, and Chinese military is controlling that said port within Pakistan. So, and then obviously being that India is bordering China, and China and India have had poor relations in the past. This kind of all leads back to China at the end of the day. And obviously, like with the tariffs and everything going on, and this last week we saw that Trump put on penalties for anybody using Iranian energy, oil, gas, et cetera, stuff like that, which then again goes back to China because China is getting most of its um, oil and gas from Iran, and so that's harmful to China. So you see tariffs there on the domestic front there directly involving China with 145% tariffs, but then you're also seeing these kind of backdoor deals that are penalizing China and other nations who deal interactively with Iran. And so this is kind of what it's all boiling down to here. And the world is on thin ice. And I think the issue is when you talk to experts, they always talk about those who have been in the land versus those who have not been in the land. The ones who have been in the land always say China is obviously a hard totalitarian communist country, but it's a paper tiger at the end of the day. And an issue that some moderate Republicans, libertarians, if you want to call them that, the Ben Shapiro types, they point to these tariffs and they say, well, this all has to, we can't do this because this has to deal with rare earth minerals. In reality, it really boils down to the processing of rare earth minerals. Rare earth minerals are not necessarily as rare as we would like to think them as. It's more so just that they're in small pockets everywhere around the world. But where China holds a majority of the stranglehold right now is in the processing and producing it into actual something. And for the US military, that's a problem because China holds majority, I think 70 something percent of the production capacity of what the rare earth minerals are used for as far as chips that go into missiles, et cetera, stuff like that, phones, computers. So that is an issue. That's something that, the Ben Shapiro types do point out. That is something that needs to be looked at, but it's also an opportunity. And this is what Trump's trying to point at is, and this goes back to Hamas, this goes back to everything, is this gives Israel an opportunity to get away from China, gives the United States get an opportunity away from China and to be able to self-produce there. And here's a stat here. In the top rare earth reserves in country versus by production, China obviously has biggest rare earth reserves in 44 metric tons, and the United States has 1.9 metric tons. But China only last year's production was 270,000 metric tons out of that 44% known reserves, and the U.S. had 45,000. So the U.S. is getting more out of what we have than what China is getting out of. I mean, if they wanted a whole monopoly, they should be in the millions of metric tons compared to like what we're producing. I don't know the multiplier there, but that's significantly not equal to the difference of the amount of rare earths. And I point that out for this is to say that yeah, there's some issues with China, and I think you mentioned it here with China of some falls of governments and rising, but the people in China they realize the paper tiger within itself. And if you talk to any experts I've been reading and listening to, is they're like, look, eh, there's only so much that people are already willing to handle. I mean, they're already making below minimum wage, quote unquote, per on the American standard, cents on the dollar. And so how much longer can they be put up with that? And COVID was a prime example of how much exposure and how far the Chinese government is willing to go of literally locking the doors to people's apartments and apartment buildings and locking you in. That that struck a nerve with the Chinese people of saying, all right, enough's enough. If we're going to die, we're going to either die by starvation or we're going to die for fighting for our freedoms. And you've seen that in Brazil and other countries
Yeah.
and stuff like that. And so it's okay. All eyes now are on Iran and China. This is what it kind of boils down to. And this is what Trump's focus is. And I'll circle back around this is you see here in the United States, and this has to deal specifically with Hamas and Israel. You see differing camps, and Trump even with inside the Trump administration, you have differing camps on how to handle. Do you be soft? Do you be hard? Do you allow Israel to go in and wipe them out? Do you not? You have those advocating for both sides, and you have this same type of debate, and some of it is good and healthy to a degree, but at the same time, it's like, all right, when's enough? When is it time to say, okay, we need to actually let those who are on the ground, and Trump's really good about this, of letting those on the ground in the situation make that decision. And I think he has to assess is Witkoff the right person? Because he's made some major mistakes. Obviously, we saw last week with the security advisor Tim Waltz, not Tim Waltz, Waltz. I forget his first name.
Yeah.
Step down and then be repositioned into the UN ambassador. Is, you know, it's okay that if somebody fails or is not doing the job, pull them out, put them where they need to be. Maybe this is not the position for him. I mean, the Witkoff he's a real estate developer, so he knows how to have negotiations when it comes to everybody kind of being on the same page or wanting to make money. But when you come to matters of national security, and in this instance, matters of international security, can he hold up to the pressure? And we see this in sports all the time. You know, there's guys who are great guys who can do a good job if it's not a stressful situation, but then when you put them in those what they call high leverage positions, they tend to falter. And unfortunately, in this case, for the world's case, Witkoff is faltering. And everybody can agree on that and attest to that. And so Trump has this debate going on inside his cabinet. And the question is, how long will he go along with it? But then also is, as you know, I was thinking about this the other day, is when you look back on presidents and the presidency, I forget his name, before Calvin Coolidge took office, was a presidency that the cabinet just ran his presidency, because the president at the time, the name's slipping my mind, before he passed away from health issues, the cabinet was running itself. And you had people who were not elected basically doing their own will. And it was chaotic. It was horrible for the country. It put the whole country in an economic downward spiral. But then you had Calvin Coolidge come in. And the reason I say this is because this is the root of President Trump's intellectual thought process when it comes to how to deal and run his presidency. Because Calvin Coolidge was Ronald Reagan's favorite president. Because when Calvin Coolidge was president, Ronald Reagan was a teenager. And he always looked at him. And the phrase "Make America Great Again" came from Calvin Coolidge. People think it came from Ronald Reagan. Well, Ronald Reagan took that from Calvin Coolidge because Calvin Coolidge was Ronald Reagan's favorite president.
It was Warren Harding who was the president.
He was the Harding before Calvin Coolidge. But when Calvin Coolidge took over, he said no more of these cabinet positions are going to run the country. It's going to be the president, because the president was the one who was elected. And Harding and Coolidge were elected based upon their agreement of economic principles. And for whatever reason, Harding just didn't do that. But I digress. And the point is this is where we need to pray, is that President Trump would have clarity with his cabinet and his officials to follow the plan. And whether we can agree with it or not, has tactics. Is the Lord has given him a vision for this country. The Lord has let him see prophetically what to do and how to handle this. And he's know what he's seeing and what he's implementing right now. He's known since the 80s. And so he's the one with the revelation here. He's the one with the vision. He's the one who got elected. And the left is right on that when they're dealing with Elon Musk. But the issue is Trump needs Elon Musk and is using Elon Musk and his skill sets to deal with some of the waste, fraud, and abuse. Now we need to see that type of kind of loyalty to the vision to a degree. In other instances, when it comes to trade, when it comes to tariffs, when it comes to Israel-U.S. relations.
Well, let me interject here or something. I want to interject something here, because one thing that Zach is tapping into is that Trump understands, because he runs businesses and he understands the economic world better than probably anybody in this country. One of the best, him and Musk, probably both. He understands what drives a nation, what drives a country, what drives everybody is economics. And that's why Jesus said either serve me or serve mammon, because there's a whole battleground about mammon runs the world, the spirit of mammon. And so Trump gets that. And we'll give an example of Iran. And he says it all the time. You've heard him say it, that he had just about shut down Iran. He dried them up. And I was lobbying Congress at that time under his administration. And we had put so many sanctions on them that they were just about, now Obama had given them money, but Trump had dried it up. And then all of a sudden Biden comes back in. I want to play this clip here from Ted Cruz. This is when Biden's still in office, and he tells how much the oil was flowing out of Iran, which gave them the money for everything that they're doing right now. And this is very important that you understand.
To enforce oil sanctions, we have seen Iran's oil sales go from 300,000 barrels a day when you got into office to over 2 million barrels a day today. That's $80 billion. 90% of Hamas's funding comes from Iran in a very real sense. This administration, you and President Biden, funded the October 7th attacks by flowing $100 billion to a homicidal, genocidal regime that funded.
Okay, so of course, he's, as he says, that's profoundly wrong. But the fact is, they did. He talked about. He asked Blinken in this interview, how many ships did Iran have when they started? 70. By the time Biden got into office, they had over 300 ships. They were instead of 300,000 barrels a day, now they started shipping out millions of barrels a day, on and on it goes. So now Iran is fully funded through the Biden administration, and now Trump is having to go back and start all over again. And that's why we need a momentum in our nation, that we don't just have a 4-year, lose 4 years, whatever. We've got to have this where we go from, I really believe this, Clay Nash, my friend, has really got some prophetic on, Lord already spoke to him that Arizona will be the key state for 2028, and that we need to focus on Arizona, especially right now, that they're going to be a swing state that's going to make the biggest difference in 2028 in the election. So we got to get to a place that we're pushing, not just for what was happening now, but we've got to have a long-term goal, play the long game. We've talked about it on here before, and Iran has got to be dried up again, and not only militarily, but physically, financially, and Trump gets it. He understands that, and he's making steps. Problem is that the Dems are fighting him all along the way, and we need to pray, especially for the Senate. I think the House will support him, but the Senate has to support this reeling all this in. And I think that's the battleground. I think it was Elon was on Fox News, Lord Trump's show the other night, and this is what he said had Trump not won. I think it's very important to hear what he says here, because had he not won, where we'd be, because he also understands the economics of it all. Let me play this.
If President Trump had not won, I think the Democrat campaign to import vast numbers of illegal voters would have succeeded, and they would have naturalized vast numbers of illegals during the sort of Kamala regime, and they would have turned America into a one-party state from which we could never escape. Some people out there may be somewhat skeptical. They may think, well, that there isn't some Democrat plan to subvert democracy and achieve a permanent one-party, deep blue socialist state. And I assure you, the more you research it, the more you will see it is true. Biden was simply asleep at the switch. He was ineffective regarding illegal immigration. No, he was highly effective at ushering in millions of illegal immigrants with a specific game plan to naturalize them and ensure that there would be no swing states in America anymore. Often the margin of victory, there will be 20 or 30,000 votes. So if you bring in 200,000 illegals, which will overwhelmingly vote for the Democrats, then that swing state becomes permanently blue. Then you have the House, the Senate, the presidency.
So that I think Elon, I think that's, you can speak to that, Zach. I think that's a great analysis of where we were headed. There's your favorite guy, Zach. I forget. I sent you a video of it. He talked about how close we were under the Biden administration of moving to what Elon Musk just said right there. And I think that was where we were headed had God not intervened with this election and used us as intercessors and used the body of Christ to fight this fight that we're in right now. And you would have never seen another election. This is what has happened in Europe and some of the nations there. It's obviously in Russia, China. This is where we were headed. And we warned on this pipeline report, we warned the whole time. We were saying this the whole time, and many others were too. I think Dutch Sheets and others were warning the same thing could have happened. And I want you to say this. We say this all the time. Prayer works. And it worked in this situation. We intervened through prayer and intercession, and God saved our nation for the moment. And this is where we could have been, but God's mercy intervened. Now, God didn't want to just have mercy so that we can have Republicans in office. He wanted to have mercy so that we can have an awakening, a move of God in our land. And that's what we're believing for. But we had to have this first in order to have that occur. And so let's keep praying into that. You can speak to that, Zach.
Yeah, the major issue is realizing that the American people are crying out for this, and this has kind of been go back to the revolution, and even you have what was called the early Great Awakenings, and we talked about it last week, and we did some research on the National Day of Prayer last Thursday, and what we found was that you had several founding fathers call for days of prayer, and one of them including Benjamin Franklin. Obviously, there's a lot of debate about his salvation and his lack of what is seen a biblical lifestyle. You go to Philadelphia and talk about it and stuff, but the reality is they all understood, whether they had those lifestyles or not, of the importance of the reliance upon the Lord and to guide this nation to not be like nations past, to where pride took over. They did things based on biblical boundaries and guidelines, and I think this nation is calling out about what it means to get back to that, and so you have people awakening, and one of the things COVID did was expose that and kind of awaken a lot of people. And we have to look at the next generation. And one of the things that kind of Laura Trump asked that question to Elon, one of the things that ticked Elon was in how the indoctrination of his children.
Mm-hmm.
And that's his motivation, and he's open about that. And to go
Yeah.
back to the border issue, is you had, in the matter of less than 100 days, really less than a week, the inflow of illegals coming into the country go from 10,000 a day to nothing, basically. And so now the issue is, how do we handle the 10 to 12 million that we know have come through within just the last 4 years, but then the millions before that? That's going to be the question. That's the thing to resolve. That's where President Trump's administration need clarity. That's where we need to pray for the judges. Obviously, being that in Arizona, you have some issues in Maricopa County. A lot of the major issues coming up right now are in Maricopa County, where you saw some issues in the 2020 election, in 2024 and 2016, et cetera. Back to back, just whatever. There's something going on in that county that is causing some
And the governor
discrepancies there.
and the governor just vetoed a bill that they passed through their legislation about illegals voting in the state. So what Elon said there is validated by that veto right there, because they were allowing that. I know they arrested 2 Ukrainians yesterday who voted illegally in the 2024 election. And that's just one. There was a study in Southern California, I know in Orange County, where they found many illegals voted in those elections, and that affected the Congress, because we remember how we were waiting so long to find out how the Congress is going to turn out because of California. They now have studies showing that the illegals did vote in those elections, and this is where we brought it the warning here, or we at least let you know to pray about it. When they do census, they don't count just Americans; they count people. So when you have illegals living in this New York and in Illinois, all these sanctuary states, California, they count those people because they do live there. So if you are counting a quote census, you're counting people. Well, that affects the redistribution of congressional seats in Congress. So you could see these states beginning to get extra seats because of the illegals. So this is a plan, a plotted plan. It's very becoming more clear, and I think Elon was speaking to that. And I think the awakening we need, and as America, is that of what's going on in the left has got to be exposed, which we're doing here, and many others are as well. We're a small little piece, but there are many that are doing that. And I was watching the Charlie Kirk little interview on Fox, and he brought it up about, and I think what he says, I want you to listen to what he says, because he really talks about where America is on some of these issues. So, and talking about AOC and stuff. Listen to this. I want to talk about this.
Charlie, it looks like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez wants to run for president with all these this campaigning she's been doing. Your thoughts?
Well, I think America is now fatigued by the catastrophizing of American politics. Everything that AOC believes is that we need urgent, multi-trillion-dollar government action because we're going to be overwhelmed because the oceans are going to take down Miami Beach. So we need to spend $100 trillion on the Green New Deal. We need to spend $50 trillion because of systemic racism. And that connects to my earlier points, which is the Democrat Party is constantly talking about an imminent apocalypse. And the American people are just done with that. Think about it. We went through COVID. We don't want to live that way. And so AOC is actually framing herself, of course, on the radical left. But if you go a layer deeper, it goes towards something that the American people are rejecting, which is we just want normalcy back in our lives. We want a secure border. We want to be able to make stuff in our country. Yet AOC, the vision that she's going to try to put forward, or Bernie, or whomever fills this caricature, is one where they say there is imminent decline and collapse unless we triple the size of the federal government.
Meanwhile,
Okay, so I think that's a good point, what he says there, and that is their viewpoint, that they want to keep building bigger government. And I think what he said there is that we are tired of. Zach led to that a while ago about Chinese. People are getting tired of this, and that's when you have revolutions. Is when the people do get tired. It goes on another topic here, and we'll shut this down.
I haven't heard one peep out of any of these Democrats about the anti-Semitism on college campuses.
Exactly. Oh, it's terrible. Not one peep, because they actually side with the Hamas wing on these college campuses. That is part of their coalition. You see, they have made some very, very dark deals over the last decade. They made a dark deal with the radical trans elements of their party. They made a dark deal with the open border lobby. And they also made a deal with this ever-growing, disturbing anti-American, anti-Semitic, anti-Western force that we've seen embedded on college campuses, which is this emergent pro-Hamas coalition. A lot of their base is sympathetic with their complaints, and they cannot shed it. So, in fact, they have to now go into the 2026 midterms and go into the 2028 midterms married to those three very unpopular.
Wow, I think he laid it out, didn't he? What they're tied to, what they're married to. I think that's a good term Charlie used there. And last week, nobody even talked about it. There were two American Israelis, they're dual citizens, in Los Angeles that were beaten and tortured and killed on the streets of Los Angeles, and nobody even talks about it. So this is where we're seeing the left go, and Trump says they're pushing out the moderates, which I think is good. I think they're splintered. Kind of reminds me of the day when the Republican Party had the Tea Party, and you started seeing a splintering there, and the Freedom Caucus and all that, and that all has fizzled out, and now you have the Republican Party, kind of like what the Democratic Party was. Is they're in unity finally at some level. No, they're not what the Dems are, but they're getting there. But I think that's a really important thing that Charlie was speaking to there.
Yeah, and to go back to kind of what I was talking about Coolidge earlier is before when Harding was president, he had all these corrupt cabinet members, and then Coolidge, he got rid of the bad ones and he kept the good ones. And I think that's what Trump's trying to decipher through right now. Is okay, who's good, who's on our side? Because Elon, even in this, they've run into some people who have been very helpful and who kind of know how to navigate this stuff, trying to avoid the swamp. And so there are some good people in government who do want to do the right things, who want to see the government get out from under this weight that's before us. And even there are those who within the military who want to do the right things as far as when it comes to Israel and China and Iran, so that we can possibly prevent as much possible as going to World War III. But then there are also those who are gung-ho. There are also those who want to see the demise of the president and the demise of the country just because Trump's in office. And that's kind of sad. And that's this place of thin ice, skating on thin ice that we're at. And this goes to every scenario, whether it be the potential of who's going to run for president, where the Democratic Party stands, where the Republican Party stands, is, the economic issues. The other day, President Trump was asked, I forget from what outlet, about some of the Wall Street analysts who say the economy is going to go in a downward spiral because of the tariffs. And Trump kind of pops back and says, well, there's also those on Wall Street who say that the tariffs are actually doing a good thing. Why don't you ever talk to them or ask about their questions? Yeah. And so it's kind of this focus of the lens of one world view, rather than being objective reporters and watchmen, as journalists are called to be. And that's what we want to try to be here, is look at both sides and say, and as far as the tariffs go, we haven't really touched on this. I don't know if we have time, but there's theoretical debates that are being had and need to be had about how to handle the situation. They seem to be working in some degrees, but then there's some degrees, if you make one wrong move, it could have the whole collapse. And China's starting to already come back to the table because the world agrees with Donald Trump, because they don't want to get taken advantage of, and they can't afford to go down the road that the United States can. And again, this is an opportunity for Americans and business developers here in this country to possibly take back some of that market cap, to be able to do some of the things and produce things, which then provides jobs here for Americans and can help the communities, et cetera, things like that, that might possibly be hurt in the future. And so there's opportunity that's abound. I just want to give that hope, even in this, place of thin ice, but it's a place of prayer for not only your, obviously the president, but it's even your local leaders. Because and we're seeing this, is there are some local leaders who are trying to copycat what Trump's doing, and it's not necessarily the right thing to do in every scenario. Is he has to be the advice and wisdom that Trump is following needs to be applied tactically, depending on the situation. And so there's enough prayer that's needed to go around, that I think, everybody's looking for a topic to pray for, is just look in your local area, pray for your local leaders, who can pray through this season for wisdom and counsel in this day and age that we're in.
Yeah, and I want to just one thing, if y'all could, I want to pray into this also. Senator Fetterman from Pennsylvania, standing on the right thing with Israel. This is a quote from the Daily Wire. It says, as Fetterman defends Israel, Dems suddenly question his mental health. If you didn't see that last week, they said his staff now is concerned for his mental health and all this. Only when he came out, because this was his quote. I'll pull it down here. We cannot negotiate with Iran. It's time to destroy their nuclear program and neutralize the remaining capabilities of its proxies. I remain steadfast with Israel, provide whatever necessary to carry this out. And as soon as he did that, all of a sudden they're questioning his mental health again, which, Fetterman, if you go to his office in D.C., it's littered with all the pictures of the hostages, and he is a avid pro-Israel guy. And so pray for him, because the media is trying to put him down through his the Democrats as well. And that leads to the last thing I want to talk about today. Saturday was the Kentucky Derby, and I just felt to watch it. We were out at the park, but I had my phone, and I felt like there was going to be something prophetic, that what happened there would be prophetic. And I think it has to do with the fake news. I think that's a big part of it. But if you watched it, let me play the end of it here, and listen to the caller, the guy calling the race, and listen to some prophetic that you can hear through this, because the Lord told me to listen to it. So I did. I want to play it and let you hear it, what he says here.
Journalism is on the move as they turn for home, and sovereignty is coming with him on the outside. The two of them go right by with a furlong to run. Journalism and sovereignty, nose to nose, down to the last 16th of a mile. Sovereignty has taken the lead. Journalism is second toward the inside. Baez is third, but it will be sovereignty to rule the Kentucky Derby. Journalism.
Okay, did you hear what he said there? I just thought it was very prophetic. Sovereignty to rule. That's what he said. And I thought that was very profound. Journalism, fake news, if we want to look at it that way. The sovereignty of God is going to supersede fake news. That's what I got out of that. And I really felt like it was a prophetic moment for that. He was number 18 as well, which is l'chaim, which is to life. That's in the Hebrew. And so I really believe it's a life, and we got to believe for that. Everything we've talked about today, Zach and I have to you guys, is that sovereignty will rule. God will rule in these situations. And that's what we got to where we got to put our trust right now, is in God's purpose, his sovereignty in the earth. And that kind of went with my dream. I had another dream. I shared a little bit on my podcast today, but I had another dream where I experienced the sovereignty of God. I actually was taken back in time to events that had occurred already in history. And I knew in the events, I knew how it was going to end. There was nothing that could change it, basically, because I'd already seen it. It's where the Bible talks about where God knows the end from the beginning. I kind of experienced that in my dream. And then I knew I woke up and I sent it to a friend of mine and I said, what do you think? But it was hard, very difficult dream, but I felt it was about the sovereignty of God. And because when God determines something, it shall be. And I know we can pray into things and we teach y'all how to do that. And we believe in that. But there's this moment sometimes where we just trust God and we have to trust him and not worry about what's going to happen. And so when I went back in time, I knew then, okay, this is going to happen. And then I heard that sovereignty, and then this horse wins. And what I'm hearing through that is that, like, doesn't matter what fake news and the journalists are doing, sovereignty is going to rule. God's sovereignty is going to rule over all. And I want us to close out today with that voice, that we trust the Lord in that area and believe for that God is going to rule in America and that his sovereignty will win out. What God has said is going to happen, and we believe that. And I want to say that when he gives us prophetic, that's when we can move things. We can pray into that. So, like right now, the World War uh, battle that we started with, we're skating on thin ice concerning that issue. Those prophets said the Lord spoke to them that we can thwart this thing. Also, the Christina Johnston prophetess, she's prophesied last year. She had a dream that a pandemic was trying to come back in the earth in 2025. But in the dream, the Lord showed her how to thwart it through prayer and intercession and praying. And that's why we do this stuff. That's why we come here on Mondays and all our prayer times and all my podcasts and everything, because I believe through evidence of seeing it happen, the fruits of it, that we can make a difference. And so Pipeline Family, 318 Company, whatever we want to call ourselves, thank you for partnering with us today and each and every Monday here at noon Central Time. And then if you watch the replay, thank you for doing that. Please share it with your friends as well as we pray and stand on the Lord's will in the earth for a time such as this. We are skating on thin ice, but the Lord even gave me in that dream skates to go through even the black ice, all those different things, and to make it back to safety to his word. That's what it was in my dream. And so I want to pray into that as we close out today. Father, I pray for everybody that's following us and partnering with us. Thank you, Father, for the intercessors, the mighty warriors that are on the other side of this camera that are watching here on their screens, on their phones or their devices. Thank you, Father, for their obedience to stay on the wall and to fight for times such as this. The watchmen that are refusing to relinquish their role and saying, yes, Lord, no matter what, if it's me and four more, it's all we need. We're going to pray. Or the 318 that rescued Lot and the family and all their possessions. You can use a mighty army, Lord, to do the same today. We thank you for that in the name of Yeshua, Jesus. Amen. Amen. Well, God bless you. We love each and every one of you. We'll be back here next Monday at 12 noon Central, as well as we come again on Tuesdays at noon and do our prayer time, and then Wednesday nights at 6:30. All right. God bless. We'll see you next week.